ከዚህ ቀጥሎ የምናቀርብላችሁ ባለፈው አመት ይመስለኛል ዲናው መንግስቱ አንድ የጻፈው መጽሐፍ ነበር። ይሄም the beautiful things that heaven bears የሚል መጽሐፍ ነበር የጻፈው። ዛሬ አመት ኢንተርቪው አድርገነው አቅርበን ነበር። በአሁኑ ሰዓት ደግሞ አዲስ መጽሐፍ ጽፏል። ይሄውም how to read the air ይላል። እንግዲህ ዲናው መንግስቱ የሚኖረው በአሁኑ ሰዓት ፓሪስ ውስጥ ነው። ግን እንዳጋጣሚ ሆኖ የሲያትል ፐብሊክ ላይብራሪ እዚህ ሲያትል ውስጥ አመጥቶ ስለነበር እንግዲህ ወጣቶችን ይዘን ሄደን እዛ ኢንተርቪው አድርገናል እና እዛ ኢንተርቪው ያደረግነውን እንግዲህ በዮናታን ነበር እዛ ተገኝቶ ኢንተርቪው ያደረገው እሱን እናቀርብላችኋለን። ዋናው እንግዲህ ፕሮግራማችን ወጣቶች በዚህ በመጽሐፍም በሚጽፉ ወይም ደግሞ ፊልም በሚሰሩ በተለያየ አቅጣጫ የተሰማሩትን በዚህ ቴሌቪዥን ፕሮግራም በማቅረብ ሌሎች ለማበረታታት እንዲቻል ነው።
Mengestu, and he is an author of a new book that has come out. This is his second book so far. It is called How to Read the Air, and we are here at the Seattle Public Library to talk to him about his inspirations and what he hoped to achieve in his literature. So first thing we want to know is your name and just kind of a background about how it went.
My name is Dinaw Mengestu. I was born in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in 1978. My family left Ethiopia in 1980 and we came to America where we lived briefly in Peoria, Illinois and then Chicago. When I was 18 I went to Georgetown University in Washington DC where I got my bachelor's in English, and then later on Columbia University in New York where I did a graduate degree in Master of Fine Arts, and then from there I began to write seriously while also working jobs as a teacher until I published my first novel, The Beautiful Things That Heaven Bears, and since then I've been a full-time writer.
And that book is pretty successful, you'd say? That's pretty good. We would like to know what inspired you to write this recent book and what you thought you could, just like what you thought people would think of it, like how it would affect others.
You know, like anything, I began writing because I love literature and I love books, and so from a very young age, when I was 13, 14, I began to spend a lot of my time reading, and I found that there was a great amount of things that I can discover in literature that I couldn't discover anywhere else. And as I grew older, I realized that was something that I was really passionate about and really committed to, and so I decided to make the best effort that I could and try to become a writer. And you know, each novel is a very different process and a different learning curve, and with the first novel I was very much interested in telling the story of my parents' generation and the story of what happened to people like my father and people like my uncle during the revolution in the 1970s and how they came to America. And now with the second novel, I'm still interested in the previous generation, but also what happens to a second generation Ethiopian Americans living inside of America, and how we grow up and how we become the people that we are.
I know different books take different times depending on the stories to write, but was this a very time-consuming project for you to work on, or did it just come straight to your head, you know, I really want to write about this,
No, both books were years of work. The first book probably took about 3.5 years to write. The second novel, from the time I began it to the time it was finished, was probably closer to 5 years. And you know, and in the case of the second novel, I was writing. It was really my only job, so I was writing every day, as much as I could. And because writing, I think, like anything else, is a difficult process. You can't just sit down and type. You have to write. You have to edit. You have to make sure that what you're doing is the best possible work that you can do. And then when it's all finished, you have to go back through the whole novel and take it apart and see what's good and what's bad, and then begin again. And so for me, it's a very long, involved process that takes years.
And is there a certain thing or, you know, people that motivated you and supported you to write this book? Was it something that you just wanted to do solely for your own purposes, or did someone like say, hey, you should do this, So,
It's a bit of both, I always wanted to write for myself. Writing is a very solitary thing. You don't do it in an office. You don't do it for other people, and it's a very difficult thing because you never know whether or not anybody will ever read your work. So it really has to begin with you. You have to write because you love it. In the same way that the only reason why you read books is because you enjoy it. Obviously, you read for school, for classes, but the reading that's oftentimes the most important is the one you do for yourself. Fortunately, my parents were always very supportive. They always encouraged me to make sure that I did what I was passionate about and what I was good at. And I was lucky to have teachers in college who said, if this is something you're interested in doing, we think you have the sort of the passion to do it. As much talent as you may have, it's also a lot about how much passion you have to do something, because you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't care enough about it, it's never going to happen for you.
And was there a certain place, like just a place where you like to either like brainstorm and generate ideas, or a certain place where you like to write in particular?
As I get older, I spend most of my time writing in my bedroom. Now I oftentimes write directly. I can wake up very early in the morning and go straight from my bed to my desk, which is right next to my bed, and I go straight to work. But when you have moments when you need time to breathe and time to really think about what you're trying to do, for me, oftentimes I take long walks, and I take long walks, or I go and I sit down and I read. So I'll go to a bookstore and I'll buy 2 or 3 novels, and I'll spend a few days just working my way through them. And that for me is often a great source of inspiration, whether I'm doing it at home or I'm doing it outside at a cafe. It's the process of being alone with a book that's often the best.
And were there any challenges you faced while writing this novel?
Everything is a challenge, I think. Anytime you want to be good at something, you're going to face challenges. Writing is no different from that. If you want to become a lawyer, you're going to face challenges preparing for the bar exam, getting through law school, if you're going to be a doctor. And being a writer is really no different. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of faith in yourself, because it's not something that comes easy. And so I think the biggest challenge is just believing in yourself enough to think that you have the right and the power and the ability to actually tell a story that other people will care about. And when you get over that challenge, I think that's the biggest and the hardest one. And then after that, you have the challenges of finding a publisher and finding an editor and making sure the book comes out. And that's very difficult. But the biggest challenges, I think, are the ones that come from inside, from the ones that say, this is something that's too hard, or it's too difficult, or it's too unlikely. And oftentimes, you have to just trust and believe that it's something that you care about. And if that's the case, then nothing should stop you.
And lastly, is there anything that you'd want to say to other young people who would like to write a novel, or maybe want to come up with stories and just generate their ideas?
I would say if you believe in literature, and I think everyone should, because there's nothing, I think, more powerful than a story. We grew up listening to stories. Our parents tell us stories. That's how we understand the world, are through stories. We know about our culture. We know about our faith. We know about places that we've never been to because people tell us stories. And so if you think that stories have power, and that they have a necessity in your life, and that they do something that nothing else in the world can do, then I would say begin by reading. And there's nothing, I think, more basic and more fundamental, whether or not you ever become a writer or not. Nothing will change your experience of the world more than reading a lot. And nothing will make you a more full, more complete individual than having a very broad background in books. If you have a passion for books, then you have a passion, I think, for life. You become exposed to 1,001 things that you would never have a chance to be exposed to. And I say that whether you want to become a writer or an engineer or nurse, whatever the case may be, I think books hold a very special power and a very special place in our culture. There are so many other mediums. There's the internet, there's movies, there's documentaries, and all of these things are important and they're great. But there's nothing that will replace the value of an actual book, especially because reading books is what helps you become a better writer. And I don't mean writing fiction or writing literature. I mean just the necessity of being a writer for any job that you have in the world. You can't become a doctor, you can't become a lawyer, you can't become a professor if you don't know how to write and if you don't know how to express your thoughts clearly. And there's no better way of learning how to do that than becoming a reader. If you don't have access to books and if you don't spend time reading, you will have a very difficult time learning how to take your ideas and take all the things that you care about, whether it's fiction or science or philosophy or history, and expressing them. It'll be very difficult to tell anybody these ideas because no one will be able to understand your words because you can't write them down. And nothing can teach you how to write better than a book. A documentary can teach you how to think about things and can show you the world in a different way visually. But in terms of knowing actually how words fit together, how one sentence goes to the next, how grammar works, how words are very powerful, how to have a better vocabulary, only literature can do that. Only novels, only books. It doesn't have to just be literature, of course, but any type of book, I think. No, it's very much fiction. You know, I mean, my family left Ethiopia and we came first to Peoria, Illinois, and that's one thing that's inside of the novel. There is a family that leaves Ethiopia and that's inside of Peoria, but that's because you begin a novel with some source of memory, and then from there the rest of the story is very much a process of imagination. You know, you know the history of different people who have left the country, you know what happened, and you take all of that information you've learned and you let your imagination go free. And you become able to invent stories that may not actually be true, but are true at the same time, because anybody can read them and say, yes, I know something similar happened to me, or something similar happened to my cousin, or my father, or my brother, because that's the power of stories. They become universal. So many writers. You know, when you spend your life reading, you discover that there's a world of great literature. Edward P. Jones, who's an American author, I love very much. James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, Willie Soyinka, V.S. Naipaul, Marilyn Robinson, and you can go on and on. I mean, then you can go old writers like Shakespeare, Ernest Hemingway, William Faulkner, James Joyce. So there's, you know, the more you read, the more you discover that there's almost an endless body of great novels out there to read.
And once again, this is Jonathan Brook and Dinaw Mengestu. Thank you for watching our program.
እሺ ተመልካቾቻችን ለዛሬ ያቀረብነው ፕሮግራም እዚህ ላይ ያበቃል። በሚቀጥለው ዝግጅት እስከምንገናኝ ደህና ሰንብቱ። ደህና ሰንብቱ።
መጪውን የኢትዮጵያን ሚሌኒየም ልክ እንዳብሮ መብላት መጠጣታችን ለለውጥ ተጋግዘን በመስራት የሀገራችንን እድገት የምናይበት ጅምር እንዲሆን የእግዚአብሔር ቅዱስ ፈቃዱ ይሁንላል። መልካም በዓል፣ መልካም ጊዜ። ይቅርታው ጊዜ እንዲሆን አሁን ይጠበቃል ከኛ ላላህ የቅዱስ መንፈስ